In early June 1940, Britain and France stand on the brink of disaster. German panzers advance toward Paris, while hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers rush to escape. On June 10th, Italy launches an invasion of southern France. Though the attack fails, it broadens the war. The Mediterranean front now stretches from the Horn of Africa to the Strait of Gibraltar. Along this vast Mediterranean river lie critical choke points, lifelines for Britain's global empire and naval bases at Gibraltar, Malta, and Alexandria. For Britain to endure, it must harness the strength of its empire. Since the mid-1930s, Italy has expanded its reach across Africa and the Balkans, causing deep concern in London, where Italian power is taken seriously. The Royal Navy initially recalls warships from the Mediterranean to home waters, desperately needed to defend the British Isles from U-boats and a possible invasion. But Churchill cancels the order. Britain's grand strategy depends on turning the conflict into a long, grinding war of attrition, and that demands control of the Mediterranean and open routes to the wider empire. By 1939, the British Empire, or Commonwealth, encompasses a quarter of the world's population, about 470 million people, and nearly a third of its landmass, with immense natural wealth. From the outset, Britain's war is an imperial one. London uses its global reach, especially through naval dominance, to maintain trade, protect shipping, and weaken Germany's economy over time. Meanwhile, Axis powers aim to undermine this system and threaten its colonies. Britain fights to preserve its empire not only for prestige but survival. The island nation imports 60% of its food, including 90% of grain and half its meat. Much of it comes from imperial territories. As Winston Churchill's son, Randolph, declared, "If we lose our empire, we shall not become a second-rank but a 10th-rank power. We have nothing. We will starve. Therefore, we must fight to the end." Yet mobilizing the Commonwealth's strength proves difficult. Britain relies most on its white dominions, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Newfoundland, and South Africa, along with India for manpower. Britain's declaration of war in 1939 automatically includes Australia and New Zealand, though this time both nations issue their own declarations as well. New Zealand's Prime Minister Michael Savage proclaims, "Where Britain goes, we go. Where she stands, we stand." Deep cultural and political bonds ensure widespread support in both countries, but overseas service is contentious. Early enthusiasm gives way to recruitment challenges caused by deployment uncertainty, low pay, and restrictions on key workers. South Africa faces greater difficulties. Most white South Africans, who alone can vote, speak Afrikaans and descend from Dutch settlers. Their bitter history with Britain from the Boer Wars leads many to favor neutrality or even a German victory. When a neutrality debate topples the government, new Prime Minister John Smuts commits South Africa to war, but recruitment lags. Racial laws barring non-Europeans from military service leave only about 5% of men eligible to fight. Canada, the last major dominion, declares war on September 10, 1939. Prime Minister W.L. Mackenzie King must navigate a divided society. While English Canadians largely support aiding Britain, French Canadians remain skeptical, and memories of the 1917 conscription crisis persist. Having opposed conscription then, King now depends heavily on French Canadian voters. So he adopts a policy of limited liability, focusing on air and naval forces to minimize losses, though an infantry division is also raised. Recruitment succeeds, and by late September, the Canadian Army expands tenfold. Overall, Commonwealth mobilization varies. The phony war of late 1939 and early 1940 dulls public urgency, discouraging volunteers. But after Germany's attack on France in May 1940, enthusiasm surges, particularly in Australia and New Zealand. Australian politician J.V. Fairbairn declares, "When the lion roars, the cubs will answer the call." New Zealand even enacts conscription for overseas service and pledges every atom of its strength to the empire. Beyond the dominions, British-ruled India also provides massive forces. Even in peacetime, the Indian Army numbers about 250,000, largely from communities labeled martial races like Sikhs, Punjabi Muslims, and Gurkhas, whom the British deem more loyal than the Hindu majority. Yet mobilization is politically charged. The Indian National Congress, led by Gandhi, demands self-rule in return for support. When Britain refuses, Congress ministers resign, but the Indian Army remains steadfast. By 1940, India fields 5 new infantry divisions and 1 armored division. With conscription too sensitive, all recruits volunteer, many for financial or social benefits. Despite efforts to broaden recruitment, by 1941 nearly half are Punjabi and 11% hail from Nepal. Not all colonies provide troops, but all must contribute. Kenya, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Malaya supply naval personnel, while others serve as vital bases. To maintain stability, Britain suppresses anti-colonial movements. For smaller colonies, the war's burdens are immense. Britain is not alone among empires at war. Mussolini's Italy, though smaller, dreams of expansion. The Italian leader hopes that aiding Germany will bring vast spoils, the French fleet, Corsica, Tunisia, or French Somaliland. Italy joins Germany's attack through the Alps, but performs poorly. When France surrenders on June 22, 1940, Italy gains little, as Berlin prefers a neutral Vichy regime. On June 11th, Italian bombers strike British Malta, but elsewhere Britain takes the initiative. From June 10 onward, British armored units raid across the Egyptian frontier into Italian Libya. Most Italian soldiers lack heavy modern arms or combat experience, trained instead for colonial policing. In one battle, Italian troops form a traditional 19th-century-style battle square, which British tanks quickly annihilate. In 3 months of fighting, Italy suffers 3,500 casualties to Britain's 150. Britain cannot launch a larger offensive either, lacking manpower and supplies. Meanwhile, France's collapse frees Italian units, and Mussolini urges an invasion of Egypt to capture Alexandria and the Suez Canal. His generals hesitate. After a friendly fire accident kills respected Commander-in-Chief Italo Balbo, Rodolfo Graziani assumes command. Though a desert veteran, his experience lies mainly in colonial warfare against Senussi tribesmen. Mussolini takes heart from Italian success in East Africa, where colonial forces have defeated a small British garrison. Yet despite outnumbering the roughly 36,000 British-led troops, Graziani's army lacks vehicles, fuel, and water. Under mounting pressure from Rome, he reluctantly advances into Egypt on September 13th, aiming only for Sidi Barrani, 80 kilometers from the border. As his forces move forward, Graziani boasts, "One wonders when the English will begin to realize that they face the best-equipped colonial army in the world, and when they will learn to respect the valor of the Italian soldier." British troops pull back, and Graziani orders his men to construct fortified camps around Sidi Barrani, again imitating colonial tactics. Mussolini demands a further drive 130 kilometers along the coast, but Graziani knows his men cannot sustain it. Italy's early gains in Egypt are made possible by redeploying troops who had been guarding the frontier with French colonies after France's defeat, a blow that shakes the French Empire. Though 7,000 French soldiers in Britain and some colonial officials join Charles de Gaulle's Free French movement, most remain loyal to the new Vichy regime. Britain now fears the powerful Vichy Navy, the world's 4th largest. Before the French surrender, British officials ask Admiral Jean-François Darlan about his intentions. Darlan replies scornfully that such questions are like heirs visiting a dying man, insisting he would scuttle his fleet before surrendering it. During the armistice talks, Hitler refrains from seizing the French ships to encourage quick peace. Churchill, however, has no faith in such assurances. The safety of the British Empire is too vital to rest on Admiral Darlan's word. Of special concern is the French fleet at Mers el-Kebir in Algeria, around 40% of all French naval strength, including 4 capital ships. British Vice Admiral James Somerville cannot blockade indefinitely, so he issues an ultimatum to French Vice Admiral Marcel Bruno Gensoul: surrender the ships, scuttle or intern them, or face attack. Many Royal Navy officers, including Somerville, feel uneasy morally and militarily, but the cabinet unanimously approves Operation Catapult. Gensoul, though sympathetic, vows to resist. When the French Admiralty orders reinforcements, Britain intercepts the message and authorizes action. At 5 p.m. on July 3rd, negotiations end. Gensol embraces British envoy Captain Cedric Holland before the French sound battle stations. Believing the British will not fire, Gensol makes no defensive preparations. His ships are moored with guns facing land. At 5:54 p.m., Somerville opens fire. The result is one-sided. 36 British salvos devastate the harbor. A magazine explosion sinks Bretagne with 1,000 crew. Provence also goes down. Dunkirk beaches itself before Gensol calls a ceasefire after 20 minutes. Strasbourg and 5 destroyers escape to Toulon. Somerville later writes, "For letting the battle cruiser escape and not sinking more French ships? I wouldn't be surprised if I were relieved of command. The truth is my heart wasn't in it. And in war, you're not allowed a heart." The French suffer 1,297 dead and 351 wounded. The British lose only 2 killed and 2 wounded. Outrage sweeps France, but Churchill believes the attack proves Britain's resolve to the world. Simultaneously, British forces in Alexandria seize French ships, neutralizing half the French Navy in one day. Yet free French recruitment sharply declines afterward. Hitler views the attack as a German advantage, deepening the rift among the Allies and possibly driving Vichy France closer to the Axis. This likely explains why he withholds French African colonies from Italy and Spain. Rome is disappointed, though it still hopes for rewards in East Africa. Italy had gained new territory by conquering Ethiopia in 1935, forming the Africa Orientale Italiana. Bordering British colonies, Mussolini envisions Kismayo as a gateway to the east, undermining British influence. Declaring himself defender of Islam, he seeks to stir anti-British feeling among Muslims. London fears Italian attacks from East Africa could strike its colonies, or even threaten the Suez Canal from the south. They could also endanger Red Sea oil routes. Italian command debates bold offensives, capturing Khartoum and Atbara to link with Graziani in Libya, or advancing into French Central Africa. Another target is the refueling station in Chad, vital to British air routes from West Africa to Egypt. There is little enthusiasm for new offensives within the Italian colonial administration in Addis Ababa. The governor, Duke Amadeo di Savoia-Aosta, has partly modernized the economy of Italian East Africa and earned a reputation as a capable and reform-minded ruler. Local Ascari troops are loyal but poorly equipped, especially lacking anti-tank weapons. The colony is dangerously exposed to isolation from the north, and Aosta estimates it could resist for only 6 months of warfare. Reluctantly, he proposes a bold strike into British Somaliland. If Italian forces can secure favorable positions before the rainy season, they could hold out until Graziani's success in Egypt or a diplomatic settlement. Aosta enjoys a numerical advantage. Around 75,000 Italians and 205,000 colonial troops, vastly outnumbering neighboring British garrisons. In August, Italian and Eritrean cavalry break through at Kassala and capture Berbera. A victory at Tug Argan Gap drives British forces from Somaliland, allowing the Italians to seize much-needed supplies. The fall of British Somaliland raises Italian morale, but Rome lacks a unified strategy, and losses are heavy. The remaining garrisons are too poorly armed to repel a serious British counterattack. Moreover, the invasion forces French colonial officials to choose sides. Some, like Pierre Boisson in French West Africa, swear loyalty to Vichy France, while others, such as Félix Eboué in Chad, rally to the Free French. Soon, Vichy and Free French troops fight each other, and by late August, all of French Equatorial Africa joins de Gaulle's cause. Now reinforced by Free French units, the British plan an assault on Boisson's Vichy forces at Dakar in September 1940. But strong Vichy resistance prevents a landing, and with mounting casualties, the Anglo-French expedition withdraws. The failure damages de Gaulle's political standing, and Britain grows hesitant to give him further military backing. Meanwhile, a new Italian offensive refocuses attention on the Mediterranean. Though Mussolini urges progress in Egypt, he also harbors ambitions nearer to Europe. In 1939, Italy established a protectorate over Albania. From there, Mussolini eyes expansion into Yugoslavia or Greece to connect with Italian islands in the Aegean. Rome deems Yugoslavia too pro-German and turns instead toward Greece. Foreign Minister and son-in-law Galeazzo Ciano presses for action, insisting Greek forces are weak, the population apathetic, and the Albanian minority eager for liberation. However, King Vittorio Emanuele, Ambassador Emanuele Grazzi, and Chief of Staff Pietro Badoglio are doubtful. The Greeks are fierce fighters. They proved it in their war against Turkey. Though they lost, they fought bravely. Mussolini and Ciano ignore the warnings. Germany, meanwhile, opposes the invasion. It needs stability in the Balkans to access raw materials, and a new front could invite British involvement. Britain has guaranteed Greek independence since April 1939, and British air bases there could threaten Romanian oil. While Berlin concedes Greece to Italy's sphere, it insists the invasion wait until Britain is subdued. Mussolini agrees, temporarily. When the Luftwaffe deploys to Romania to guard the oil fields, a furious Mussolini decides to act anyway. Hitler always confronts me with fate's accomplice. This time, I'll return the favor. He'll read in the papers that I've occupied Greece. Then balance will be restored. Italian plans evolve from partial occupation to full conquest. But preparations are hasty, undermined by autumn harvest demobilizations, unmotivated officers, and insufficient ports. Durazzo, the only major harbor, is already jammed with barges hauling marble for fascist construction projects, leaving some units without heavy weapons. Mussolini hopes Bulgaria will assist, but King Boris refuses. By late October, 6 Italian divisions, including the elite Giulia Alpini, mass on the Greek-Albanian border. About 87,000 Italian troops expect to face just 30,000 Greeks, though intelligence warns there may be 10 times as many defenders. Italian propaganda and poor secrecy ensure Greek leader Ioannis Metaxas is fully aware of the coming attack. He plans a defensive withdrawal to Mount Othris, though some officers favor counterattacks. Fortunately for Greece, the mountainous frontier restricts invasion routes. Mussolini sets the assault for October 28th, the day of Hitler's visit to Florence, hoping to astonish his ally with swift success. At 3 a.m., after staged border clashes, Ambassador Grazzi delivers an ultimatum. Italy will occupy key Greek positions, or war will follow. Metaxas replies in calm French, "Alors, c'est la guerre! Then it's war!" His reply later becomes the defiant, "Oci!" No. In truth, Italian troops like Lieutenant Genserico Fontana are already advancing. The night is dark and rainy. Tomorrow may bring glory if Mars favors us. Though few, we fear nothing. Our grenades feel light in our pockets. Dawn comes, gray and soundless. The first Italian strike sends the Ferrara, Siena, and Centauro divisions with 163 light tanks into the Calamus Valley toward Ioannina, while the Giulia division attacks through Mount Smolicus, and a smaller force pushes along the coast. Although Greek forces had anticipated aggression, ordinary soldiers are stunned when war breaks out. We woke around 6:30. Thunder rolled from the west, flashes lighting the clouds. Rumors spread, war with Italy. We were shocked. None of us expected it. Our hearts froze. Initial resistance is minimal, but heavy rain slows the Italian advance. Greek 8th Division Commander Charalambos Katsamitros decides to hold at Kalpaki, where the invaders must cross open ground. By November 2nd, Italian columns enter the area and meet fierce artillery fire from hidden batteries. Though the Greeks lack anti-tank guns, their gunners scatter the enemy armor, and infantry disable tanks by hurling blankets onto their treads. As fighting intensifies across the plain, the struggle for Gramballa Hill turns bitter, changing hands several times. When the skies clear, Italian aircraft bombard Greek positions. A bomb screamed over me and struck the forest below, 20 meters from my tent. A comrade cried for help, his foot gone. I ran to the crater. One body lay headless, his blood pooling. Beside him, a corporal still breathed, his back torn open, his intestines spilling out. He died in my arms. His heart was utterly shattered by the horror. While the Italians struggled at Kalpaki, the Giulia division struck Greek defenses in the Pindus Mountains. They made some initial headway against Greek reservists, but sporadic sniping and miserable weather soon exhausted and disorganized the attackers. When Greek reinforcements halted the Italian advance on November 2nd, the Greeks launched a counterattack, seizing Samarina and threatening to encircle the Italians. By November 8th, the Greeks captured Distrato, forcing the Giulia to retreat. In just 2 weeks of combat, the division lost a fifth of its manpower. The Greek army now seized the initiative, even pushing into Albania from the north. Frustrated, Mussolini ordered his air force to bomb every Greek town with over 10,000 inhabitants. The Regia Aeronautica had already bombed Athens and other targets to little effect, depriving Italy's ground forces of much-needed air support. Tension mounted in Rome with talk of a truce, even the possibility of requesting German aid. Hitler was enraged when he learned of the invasion during a meeting in Florence. His adjutant later recalled, "The Führer was in a fury. He said this incident had ruined many of his plans, and doubted the Italians could ever defeat Greece." Holland 4:14. The Greek fiasco was only the beginning of Mussolini's troubles. By late autumn, Hitler abandoned his invasion of Britain and shelved his Mediterranean ambitions. He attempted to draw Francisco Franco into the war and planned to seize Gibraltar, hoping also to secure Vichy France as a firm ally. Yet Mussolini's misstep, combined with overlapping territorial ambitions among Spain, France, and Italy, ended those hopes. Hitler now turned his attention to invading the Soviet Union, a shift that gave Churchill renewed confidence to exploit Italian weaknesses. By 1940, Italy's navy ranked fifth in the world and posed a theoretical threat to Britain's empire around the Suez Canal. But by the end of the year, the Italian supermarina had achieved little. A naval clash off Calabria in July ended without result, exposing Italy's strategic and operational flaws. German intelligence chief Admiral Wilhelm Canaris observed, "The Italian Navy possesses first-rate qualities that should let it match the world's best fleets. It's unfortunate its high command lacks resolve, likely because it must obey the chaotic directives of the Supreme Command." Simmons. Italy's naval leadership remained deeply conservative and loyalist. Few officers supported Mussolini, preferring rigid, centralized decision-making. Coordination with the army and air force was poor. The Navy only learned of the Greek invasion 12 days before it began. Most of the fleet stayed anchored at Taranto, shielded by coastal guns. A conventional amphibious assault seemed impossible, but Britain had other plans. The aircraft carrier HMS Illustrious led a purely aerial attack on the Italian fleet. Carrier warfare was still in its infancy in 1940, meant mainly to provide cover for surface fleets rather than to strike independently. The British Swordfish torpedo bombers were slow, obsolete biplanes, yet they were reliable, adaptable, and entirely unexpected. Although the Italians deployed anti-torpedo nets, the British had developed new duplex piston torpedoes that could dive beneath them and explode using a ship's magnetic field. On the night of November 11-12, Operation Judgment commenced. 24 Swordfish launched toward Taranto, dropping flares to illuminate their targets. Their torpedoes struck the tightly packed Italian ships. Littorio and Duilio were hit, while Conte di Cavour was beached to avoid sinking. Several more ships were damaged, and shore installations were left burning. The British achieved complete surprise, crippling half the supermarina in one night. Italian commander Marcantonio Bragadin lamented, "Bulletin followed bulletin." It seemed a great naval battle had taken place, and no one knew if, or when, recovery from its grave consequences was possible. Simmons. Though much of the Taranto damage could be repaired, the Italian fleet was effectively paralyzed. The Navy dispersed its surviving ships, reducing effectiveness just as Italian armies in North Africa required supplies. For Graziani in Egypt, time was already running out. By December, fears of a German invasion of Britain had eased. Reinforcements, including British and Commonwealth troops, poured into Alexandria, equipped with Matilda tanks and Hurricane fighters. Western Desert Force Commander Lieutenant General Richard O'Connor recognized how speed and mechanization could decide battles in the desert. The Matilda, nearly impervious to Italian weapons, would play a key role in Operation Compass. In early December, British-led forces, with large Indian contingents, assembled in the Egyptian desert. Naval bombardments and air raids destroyed Italian aircraft and distracted defenders from the buildup. The Italians noticed some activity but underestimated its threat. At dawn on December 9th, British forces surged into Nibewa through poorly marked minefields. The 23 Italian M11 tanks were caught off guard. Matildas destroyed 13 almost immediately. One Italian doctor later recalled, "It was the nearest thing to hell I ever saw." Latimer 32. Lacking anti-tank weapons, Italian troops resorted to throwing grenades at British armor. But despite desperate bravery, the battle was entirely one-sided. The British took 4,000 prisoners while losing only 2 killed and 5 wounded. After securing Nibewa, they struck Tumar west, repelled a counterattack from Tumar east, and advanced swiftly as the 4th Armored Brigade moved to cut the city Barani-Bardia road. The next day, the offensive pressed on, though fierce Italian artillery fire and sandstorms slowed progress, particularly for Shelby Force in the east. Some British columns advanced blindly through the desert, steering only by compass toward their objectives. British columns navigate the desert by compass alone, pushing through sandstorms toward their objectives. They seize Maktila with the help of naval bombardment, but at Sidi Barani, Italian resistance is determined enough to drive Shelby Force back temporarily. Yet Italian morale collapses rapidly. Tumar East and Point 90 surrender, and as artillery, aircraft, and Matildas concentrate on Sidi Barani, it too falls. British mobile units speed westward, capturing retreating Italians. One British soldier radioed his HQ, "Have reached the 2nd B in Buke. Looks like 20 acres of officers and 100 acres of men." In only 3 days, the British take 38,000 prisoners, 237 guns, and 73 tanks. Still, the Italians are not finished and retreat to fortified positions farther west. Their North African defeat also signals the collapse of Italian hopes in East Africa. Morale plunges as Aosta braces for a powerful British counteroffensive. When the rains end in December 1940, Britain strengthens its East African forces with Indian and South African troops armed with modern weapons, radios, vehicles, and aircraft. General Sir Archibald Wavell vows to restore British honor in the region. Britain also pledges to return Emperor Haile Selassie to his throne, hoping to spark revolt against Italian rule. With superior British and South African fighters sweeping the skies, Aosta scatters his army into isolated strongholds, surrendering control of the countryside. By early 1941, the Italians abandoned Mogadishu after suffering 30,000 casualties. Thus, by December 1940, Britain can boast several victories despite the disastrous summer. It has averted invasion and turned to the offensive. Germany, meanwhile, does little to disrupt British imperial strategy, unable to challenge its reach. Drawn into a grinding war with the Empire, Hitler's Reich may already be heading toward eventual defeat. As historian John Darwin observed, the immense scale of the British Empire's territories and dominions made it almost impossible to imagine its total destruction. Yet Britain is far from triumph. Though Italy falters everywhere, Germany's dominance across Europe remains intact, and U-boats tighten their grip on the Atlantic. British campaigns against Italy on Europe's fringes serve not only to safeguard imperial roots, but also because no other major front is yet possible. Even as the Commonwealth rallies to Britain's side, its members impose conditions, determined to avoid the slaughter of World War I. While they fight under British command, the Dominions insist their troops retain national identities. Their leaders press Churchill to affirm that these contributions come from sovereign nations, not subservient colonies. The war also allows dominions like Australia to redefine their relationship with Britain. For India's nationalists, the conflict offers leverage. Gandhi demands full independence in June 1940 and launches a civil disobedience movement that leads to mass arrests, including his own. Though Britain can suppress dissent for now, Indian leaders see the writing on the wall. The British Empire will go to pieces, and not all the king's horses or men will put it together again, warned Jawaharlal Nehru. By rallying its empire once more for war, Britain may also be hastening its eventual decline. Canada, for its part, later sends troops to Europe, where the 1st Canadian Army fights through to the Rhine in 1945. If you want to explore the final major battle on the Western Front, the Battle of the Rhine, watch our 5-part series Rhineland 45. It chronicles the brutal campaign from the Dutch border to the crossing of the Rhine with maps, interviews, and rare footage. Because of its uncompromising realism, YouTube couldn't host it, but it's available in full 4K on Nebula, the creator-led streaming platform where we share all our documentaries ad-free and early. On Nebula, you can also find 16 Days in Berlin, Red Atoms, and dozens of other in-depth history series for just $36 a year, or join with a lifetime membership that supports creators like us at Real-Time History directly. Special thanks to Marcus Linka, Athanasiu Volantis, and Dr. Vanda Wilcox for their help with this episode. To dive deeper into World War II in 1940, check out our earlier documentaries on the Battle of France and Winter War. I'm Jesse Alexander, and this has been a production of Real-Time History, the history channel that keeps its heart even in times of war.